The importance of having a purpose is because it's God-given. You know, God has a purpose for us. I think it is good for us to reevaluate where we are in our lives instead of just plowing through and next thing you know, 30 years later, you're like, what am I doing?
Or what have I done? If we're just here out of random processes, then there is no meaning to life. It's just random. You here, you live your life, you die. So what? Who cares?
And we're not just here randomly. I think the ultimate purpose is to...
I'm Chuck Tate, and here at Fellowship of Believers, we encourage families, strengthen marriages, and edify the body of Christ.
I'm Larry Grimm. We also promote biblical doctrine in a fun and engaging way.
And I'm Sarah, and if it's Christian, we're talking about it.
This is the Mike Charleston Show. All right. This is, I guess this is our Christmas episode.
Would it be?
Yeah, it's coming out on Christmas. So it's going to drop on Christmas, even though today's not Christmas, but it is. If you're listening to this when it comes out, it's Christmas. And if you're listening to it after, it's not. So it's probably a better chance that it's not Christmas than it is.
Today is our anniversary.
On Christmas?
No, today.
Today. So if you know what day we're recording, you know when their anniversary is. How many years have you been married?
32.
Wow.
Yeah.
And have you figured out the reason?
You caught up with me.
Yeah, we did. That's right. Caught up.
How many years? 32?
32.
32. That's, oh my goodness. Yeah. Good
supposed
timing.
To silence your phones.
That's right.
Before we start recording.
I forgot. Yep. Whatever. Nothing like live.
Can't complain too much. It is the Mike Charleston Show. So
Yes. I muted everything else but my phone. So anyways, just so you know, we are behind the scenes here a little bit. We've been trying to, this whole season on YouTube, break up the segments a little bit. We have the main subject, the Larry History Time with Larry. We have the marriage moment, the music, the song of the week. And we try to break that out and put it on the YouTube thing. Well, we're trying not to do that so much because it's a lot of work. So if you want to just skip up to those things, we have time marks. Time is that what they're called? Timestamps. On the bottom here, and you can just go right there. But you might want to listen to the first segment at least.
Exactly.
Right.
The best part.
No, we'll see what we can do. Some of it just takes a lot of work editing and putting all that out. And so anyway, the issue that we're going to be talking about today is actually a fairly big one. And the reason why we were doing this is this time of year, like we mentioned, it's Christmas, around the Christmas holidays, and we didn't want to do a Christmas episode, but it was, there's a lot of joy this time of year.
Yeah.
And it is also the most depressing time of year.
Yeah.
Most suicides that happen this time of year. And I think I have reasons for that, but what I think are the reasons for that, but it doesn't matter. It's a lot of emotions this time of year. It's good and bad, and it's frustrations, and people start like, what is the point? What is the point of life? And because things don't go their way, and they start looking, it starts to become the end of the year. Right. A week later is the end of the year, and it's like, well, most people start thinking,
what am I doing?
Right. Which is actually not a bad thing. I think this is something that is a good thing to reevaluate. I know last episode we were talking about deconstruction, and I'm not really for the term, but I do think it is good for us to reevaluate where we are in our lives and where we are in our marriages and church and work and all those things. And instead of just plowing through and next thing you know, 30 years later, you're like, what am I doing?
Or what have I done?
What have I done? What have I done? But it's like, if you know what you're doing and why you're doing, I forget how we put it yesterday, we were talking about this, but if you have a purpose and you have a meaning to your life, the how makes a little bit more sense. Does that make sense?
Right. It usually makes things easier too.
Right. Well, sure. Mm-hmm. Right. If you don't have a plan, you don't have a direction, you don't have a purpose, any road's going to get you there.
Right.
Because there's no goal. There's no place you're trying to reach. So therefore, pick any way.
Yeah.
It's going to get you there. But if you have something in mind that you're shooting for, and as Christians, I think that very much so we should. Like we should have direction in our lives. There should be goals in our lives. And I think it was a few years ago, we did a series called Seasons of Life.
Yeah.
And we had 4 episodes of that. The first season was basically the first 20 years of your life and what to expect and what that looks like, and kind of your purpose during the first 20 years of your life. And then the second 20 years was the next episode, and next 20 years, and next 20 years. So basically 80 years, and how 20-year spans is like 4 different segments of our lives, basically. And there's a different purpose for each segment. And, so if you understand where your place is in all of this, life does kind of fit a little bit easier. It can, at least.
Yeah,
there's still frustrations, and there's still confusion, and there's still like, what am I really doing here? But I think that does help if we understand our purpose and our meaning.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think that's what, to me, separates us from the rest of the world as Christians, is that our purpose is, we have purpose. Whereas I feel like in the world, I mean, what purpose can you have? You're just going to live your life and then you die and it's all over.
If your purpose in this world is to make lots of money. So this was our example I was talking about last night, that if our purpose is to make a lot of money, you can do that.
You definitely can.
But you can do that immorally too.
Right.
And there's moral ways, and there's immoral ways, and then there's impractical ways. Like you could work tons of overtime and kill yourself in the pursuit of money.
Usually in life, there's a cost.
Yes.
If you want to earn a lot of money, well, it's going to cost something to get there. Most of the time, people sacrifice their families for that.
Sure.
Advancement in career and all that. And then their family suffers. But it's very seldom do you find somebody who's very successful in business and also very successful in their family life.
True. I mean, it's possible, I'm sure.
It's possible, yeah, but that's an anomaly.
Right, because you get so caught up in... And like, this is my reason of being.
Yeah, it becomes your life. The reason for your whole life is that.
Right.
And then everything else has to fit into that goal.
Right. It's the motivation. It's the thing that's giving you whatever you're looking for. That's where you're pulling from it to find the meaning, and everything else is just secondary.
Yeah. So if you're going back to the money situation, the example, it's like, okay, there are good ways to attaining that, and there are bad ways. There's immoral ways, obviously. You could do it through drugs, and prostitution, and like that's not what people would want. Or you could work hard and you have a goal in mind and say, this is how I want it. But then you'd think, well, is there a right way to do this?
Right.
So is that even the proper goal? Yeah, exactly. Now. But so if we have to question, like, okay, so what is my overall purpose of my life? And then we obviously, as a husband, I do want to provide for my family. I think that's a given.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah, why?
Why? Maybe I could be like the animals and just abandon my family and be like, I don't care. Let them fend for themselves. But because we have a higher purpose, because we believe there is a God, we believe that there is an accountability to this God, and because we want to do what this God tells us to do, and we want to live righteously and by His plan, by His purpose.
Right.
He has a purpose for us. And so we want to follow His purposes in His direction. And so in that way, it's like, okay, going back to that example, is making money the ultimate purpose? No.
Yeah.
But is it part of the purpose?
It could be, yeah.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, I would think it
depends
has to be somewhat.
It's like, why do you want the money? What are you going to do with it once you get it?
And buy things and then you can be happy.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, no, then it goes back to C.S. Lewis's quote, where,
that's right.
what does that say? It's kind of funny. It took me a while to understand what it was trying to say.
He said, the homemaker has the ultimate career. All other careers exist for one purpose only, and that is to support the ultimate career.
And in a way, that's true. You're a homemaker, and everything we do is to support you.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, that is, the family is the foundation of society, and the mothers have an important role because they're training the kids for the most part for most of their early years,
Right.
preparing them hopefully for adulthood and to be productive, good citizens.
Yeah.
And that's,
Well, but like for what I know, like we were talking off air, the atheist. Now, I was watching a video not too long ago about an atheist who was offended by the concept of someone just threw out a statement. So I don't know if this was part of a debate, but it was a statement this guy made that says, if there is no God, then there's no meaning to life, and you can do whatever you want. There's no morals. And he took offense to that. And he's like, just because I don't believe in a God, that I have to answer to a God in the sky, that is going to punish me for all my doings, doesn't mean that I can't do good down here. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're missing the whole point, though.
Right.
Why?
Yeah, what is the point?
Right, because because out of altruism, but who defines that? And who defines what is good and what is right at that point? And why not just do whatever you feel like doing if you don't have to? There's no, and like I was pointing out to my kids, I don't obey God out of fear that He's going to punish me.
Right.
I obey God and do what He wants because I love Him.
Yeah.
And I want to do what He wants because His purposes on this planet is that He loves people, and therefore I want to demonstrate that and show love to others around me because that's who He is, and I want to replicate that. Not because I'm afraid that He's going to strike me down, and maybe that's a small part of it. Like, ooh, if I do this, is that good? Maybe I shouldn't do this. Right. But because at the end of the day, it's not helpful to another person because we believe in a God.
Yeah. If that's an important point, if we're just here out of random processes, then there is no meaning to life. It's just random. You here, you live your life, you die, and you go back to dirt. And so what? Who cares? So there's nothing.
It's also interesting when you think about somebody who's an atheist that doesn't believe in a God. So there's nobody that they are actually answering to. I understand the why have a moral compass, but the interesting thing is, where do they get the moral compass?
Right, exactly.
That's the problem. Right.
The only thing I can come up with is just the relationship with other people. They want to have a relationship with someone else. Well, they want to treat them in such a way that they reciprocate and are treated nice themselves. So it's the societal purpose to be lifted up to be nice to other people.
Sure.
But that's it's just a temporary.
Right. Yeah. And for what reason?
Right. What makes that more right than say a tribal warfare, and cannibalism and things like that. Besides, it's disgusting to human bacon.
Yeah.
But anyway, no. So I mean, obviously, we're kind of straying a little bit there, but the importance of having a purpose is because it's God-given. God has a purpose for us, and we're not just here randomly. I think the ultimate purpose, for us is to glorify God and to worship Him.
It's funny. I thought it was a Bible verse, but it's actually a catechism.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Did you look that up?
Yes.
The chief end of man.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever.
Right. Yeah. That was in Second Hesitations.
Yeah. That's right. I was from the Westminster Confession.
Right. No, that was we taught our kids that early on, and that's the first question, right? Mm-hmm. What is? But that is a good,
because you think about it, like we were saying, what is our purpose of being here? If it is meaningless, then just live it up for yourself and enjoy, because you're only going to be here for 70, 80 years at the most, maybe a little longer. But what is that? You think of 100 years ago, cars were just new.
Right.
And we've come a long way in 100 years. So
sure,
that's nothing. And if the earth is 4 billion years old, what is 100 years in that? It's nothing. So it leaves you with absolutely just nothingness. Right. There's no purpose, no meaning. It's just bleak. It's
empty.
Yeah, it's empty.
We all come to realize that there's an end to life.
Right.
For everybody, there is an end to life. And as a Christian, we look at the end of life as something that's going to be better.
Yes.
Right.
And our focus is on our end of life is the reason we live today is because we know that at the end, it's going to be better. We're actually going to have an infinite existence with God.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't believe that still looks at the end of life and says, that's it. What then?
Yeah.
So there's no meaning to anything you do today except for what can I do for me and what can I get the most pleasure from in the moment?
Well, yeah. And then so talking about like there's so many times that we do things that we don't even know why. And so if we're not just talking about work or, marriage even, like why even get married? Why have a family? Why go to work? Well, all these things. If people just get up and do these things just because, that's going to lead to meaninglessness. And that's where we have like the middle age crisis, or what do they call it? Midlife crisis. Yeah, middle age, whatever. I'm going through it right now. the mid-age crisis, whatever, midlife crisis, where they get to a certain point and they look around and said, what have I've spent all this time doing what everybody has told me. Right. I got a degree, I got a job, I'm making money, I live in a house, everything's looking good. But what's the point? Right. And then they start looking around and be like, there doesn't seem to be a point to this. We're just in this vicious circle here. And then so they start living for themselves, usually. They go buy fancy cars and motorcycles and change their lives and end up ruining their marriage and stuff. But anyways, it does tend to, lead to meaninglessness. And so you have a life of meaning or you have a life of meaninglessness.
Right.
And
so then how do you get a life of meaning?
Well, it ultimately comes from Christ, from God. Yeah. God gives us that meaning. Having life comes from God. And so it is our lifelong pursuit to figure that out. That's why everyone asks this question. Yeah. Whether you're a Christian or not, there's many religions are like, what's the point? Yeah. And so we try to figure that out. And a lot of other religions fall short of the meaning, but they at least try to explain it somewhat, and it's weak. Or you have some that deny it absolutely. Like there is no meaning. So just live life, man. It doesn't matter.
Or we just cycle through reincarnation and hopefully reach a state of nothingness.
Nirvana?
Yeah. Nirvana.
That's the goal, huh?
That's the goal. Okay.
Now, you have a little note here that says, is there meaning to life? Are we just a product of random processes? Are we just the pawns in God's cosmic game? Calvinism, divine determinism, fatalism, or is this a real purpose, meaning? Is that you?
Yeah.
Okay. You put that note in?
I did.
Okay.
Well, because you think about it, because you just mentioned other religions, but even in some Christian,
absolutely right.
Christian religion, like Calvinism, what is the purpose? If everything was already, and divine determinism, everything was already predetermined by God, and we have no choice in the matter,
then what's the point?
And nothing matters.
And nothing matters because it doesn't.
Well, they would say it matters to God, but from our point of view,
what
does that mean to me?
Right, and I can't actually learn anything. I can't grow. I can't do anything. I'm subject to a predetermined outcome, and so I really don't have a purpose except for whatever God dictates.
God wants. And if God wants me to be condemned to hell forever, then
I should enjoy it.
Yeah, I got the short end of the straw on that one. But I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I might as well just live it up at that point. Why try to be a good person? Why try to be nice? Because the end result's still going to be the same.
Sure.
So in that Christian world, that religious world, there is no answer because it does come down to hopelessness and meaninglessness.
Right.
And it's like, well, then why? Why even try?
No, and so where's that quote? Did you put that quote on here? No, you didn't have that quote, but I always misquote it. But about meaninglessness, and what's the problem with meaninglessness, babe? Are you going to say it correctly?
No, I'm not.
Why didn't you have the quote down here? I thought I put it on here.
You're talking about the weariness of pain instead of the weariness of pleasure.
Right.
Meaningless comes from the weariness of...
It's not... Meaninglessness doesn't come from weariness of pain. It comes from weariness of pleasure.
Yeah.
And think about that. A lot of the times we think that meaninglessness is because these third world countries, look at them. They're suffering, they're struggling. And I think Malcolm Muggeridge said that. But, like they have no meaning in life. But in fact, it's the opposite, that meaninglessness doesn't come from pain. It comes from having too much, so the pleasure part where
you get bored with it.
Yeah. You get, I mean, look at Ecclesiastes, right? Yeah. With Solomon, he tried everything and he's like, it's all meaninglessness.
Vanity of vanities.
When you even look at like with parenting, when when you look at kids that have purpose and they're part of a family and they need to work to help keep this household together, whether, you're back in an agrarian society or even now, whatever, if your kids are part of something, then they feel like they have meaning, they have purpose. But the kids that have no reason to, they just, everything's handed to them. They don't have a reason, they struggle with finding meaning. And it's like, but you think, well, you have everything. Why aren't you happy? But it's like, but as humans, I think we long to feel meaning. We long to feel like there's a purpose to my existence.
Right.
So.
I struggled with this with my job for a while. I had a job that's very vain. Like I clean windows and they get dirty, and I'm like, well, there doesn't seem to be much point to this. And even my boss struggled with it at some point. And he did point out, this was like maybe 10 years ago. And I'm like, I want to do something that means something. And he's like, but Mike, you do. This is a means to an end. You are providing for your family, and that gives you an opportunity to do all the other things that you want to do. The being a window cleaner doesn't define who you are.
Right. No. Yeah.
It's the other things that define who you are. And I was like, you know what? I do provide a legitimate service. It's not like it's illegal or immoral. Right. And it does provide me with a means to raise my family. Yeah. And in fact, I was talking to a customer. This is kind of appropriate because if I would have planned my life, what's my purpose of family and all that, I would not have picked my job because I'm like, this job is lame. And like, I don't want to do that. I want something, but the way God worked it out, it was perfect for me. And I was able to, during those years when I had 7 kids in 8 years, I had no time to study or anything, but at work, I had time to listen to all kinds of books. I could listen to the Bible. I could listen to all kinds of teachings and all that. And I was able to teach and share and discuss these things. And most of the things I learned was in those years when I had all those kids where most of the time you don't have time. And I felt like, as someone pointed out to me, they said it reminded me of like David when he was out with the sheep, with the shepherd. He was the shepherd and he was out with the sheep for many years, being trained to be a king. Now, I'm not saying I'm a king or anything, but it was helping me for what I'm going to do in the future. And I would not have planned it that way. And so God has a very interesting way of helping us out.
Right. Well, that goes back to the purpose. You weren't looking at your job as your purpose or fulfillment. You had something else as a higher goal.
Right.
And that gave you meaning and purpose that helped you through that.
Which helps, when things go bad, because then it's like, if I lost that job, I'm not tied to my identity is not tied to that job, even though it's a big part of who I am, but I'm not, my purposes are still the same. My purpose is still to love God, love my neighbor, love my wife, love my kids, raise my kids up in a godly way, and to do God's purposes. That is still the same, whether I lose my job or not, right? So that helps you stay focused, that when bad times come, you can say, well, my purpose still remains the same. I have meaning. It's not like my meaning was tied up in my house or my job or my car or whatever, things that can rust away and go away. That would be terrible.
And you think of the early church, what they suffered in persecution, they had a higher purpose. And so they were willing to endure that suffering and the persecution that they did because of that higher purpose. And they knew that there was a meaning to their life and it had a higher purpose.
Sure.
And a lot of them, it was because they kept the scriptures and they didn't want to give them over to the corrupt church at the time. And so they gave their lives for that.
Sure. So let me ask Chuck and Larry and Sarah even, so do you think it's good for us to question our purposes fairly often?
Yeah, I do. I believe that being able to just step back and examine what we're doing.
Sure.
And
whether it's church,
determine, whatever
family,
it might be, church, family, work, extended family, or whatever you're doing, whatever you're spending your time on, what's the benefits from it? What is it? What purpose does it have?
Sure.
And figuring out, we look at things and see what are we wasting our time on, because we're all wasting time somewhere.
Right.
Can we be more beneficial with our time and what we're doing?
Some people would say we're wasting time right now.
Wow.
But yeah, it's once you know the purpose. So I think it is good to question that,
absolutely.
These things, and be like, okay, babe, like, what do we need to change in our relationship? Kids are changing. We're moving into a different phase where we're soon to be grandparents, and our kids are getting older, and they don't need as much parenting. They need more. What's the word I'm looking for? More direction,
mentoring.
More mentoring. Sure,
Yeah.
but it's changing for us. But it's still important, and there's a purpose to it. But if I forget where I was going with that, but
We need purpose.
Yeah, we need purpose.
I think it's absolutely important to question what the purpose is, and that's why I do like this time of year. That's why I like Mondays, because every week it's like
it's a new week.
It's a new week. In the morning, I like it's
a new day.
So I think anytime
it's a new year.
We can stop and pause and think about why we're doing what we're doing. I think that could definitely help, because
that's what I was going to say.
We so easily get into a rut of just going and doing and going and doing and going and doing. And we don't often pause to say, why are we doing it like this?
Well, that leads to what I was going to say, that the once you have the purpose, the how, it still needs to, you can still figure it out. You still need to figure out the how. So you can even find the purpose of our marriage. If your purpose of your marriage is just to get pleasure, it's a bad purpose. Your purpose should become one with your partner, and amongst others. And we'll talk about that later. But in the marriage segment, hint. But once you have your purpose, the how to becomes a little bit easier. It doesn't make it completely easy.
Right.
You still gotta be like, okay, I know what my purpose is for my job and all this, but our church. Well, how do we go about doing it? It still takes the Holy Spirit.
Right.
It still takes study and figuring these things out, but it makes it more directed. Like, okay, now I know what I want to raise my kids in a godly home. How do I do that? I have no clue.
Right.
Okay, let me go to the scriptures. Let me ask around. Let me see what other people have done. So now my purpose drives me to want to. And I'm not talking about the purpose-driven life, but but my purpose drives me to figure that out, because now I have meaning. We know so many people that they're just floating. So they have a family and they're just like, I'm losing control. I don't know. My kids are all over the place. I'm not enjoying my family. I'm just trying to get through. And then they take that same attitude in their work and church, and they're just like, I'm just floating. And once they realize the purpose of these things, they can seek answers, and it helps out. It doesn't make it perfect, but it surely helps, that I can endure some of the hard times. Kind of like my friend that had the little kids. I don't know if we talked about this on the air or not, or if we were just talking earlier, but or later. Whoops. But my friend at work, who is newly married somewhat, and he has 2 young kids, and the kids are killing him. And he's not enjoying it. And I'm like, but this has a greater purpose in your life. And it's you should enjoy this time, because it's working something in you that you couldn't work out yourself necessarily. Right. Yeah. So this is a good, enjoy it while you can, even though you're not getting any sleep. It's miserable. It's whatever. So same thing like in church, like when you're talking about, well, what's the purpose of church? Because a lot of people just go through the motions. They show up on Sunday to a brick and mortar building, and they're just like, well, the purpose of church is to glorify God. Is it? Well,
right.
Maybe you should study the scriptures and figure out what the purpose is. The purpose of marriage is to have kids. Is it? Maybe you should search the scriptures and figure out what the purpose really is.
Well, that's a good question. So I know now we talked about the world in general, those who aren't Christian or don't necessarily believe in the scriptures. So their purpose isn't in what God wants. But for a Christian, how do we determine what our purpose is? So
that's a good
question.
question.
Question becomes, because I know this is one that's out there, are we doing God's purpose?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I got a follow-up question with that. Is
2 questions.
Yeah.
Question with a question.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You're going to answer my question with the question?
Well, no, but it's a kind of along the same lines. It's, do we find purpose or do we make a purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's both. I mean, because like to answer your question first, and I know you have an answer for yours.
Not really.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to answer your own. But to find, so your question was basically how do we find our purpose, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's to find God's purpose in this. What is God's plan? And so once we, study in the scriptures, we find out what God's plan is for marriage. God's plan is, so I don't care what what society says or the culture says. If I look out there and I see what the TV shows are playing or movies or just what people are doing, and I get an idea of what the nuclear family looks like, it's not what the Bible teaches. Right. So I want to go with what God's purpose is for family, what God's purpose is for work, what God's purpose is for the church, what God's purpose is for all those things. And that's where I want to fall in line. Right. Now, that has many different...
But the question then becomes, does God have a specific purpose for me?
Right.
Yeah. Sure, why not? I mean...
Sure, why not? What kind of answer is that? Seriously?
Because we get so self-centered and like, I always have to have a purpose, but why don't we just fall in line with what God's doing? I don't know if this goes along with what you were saying, Larry, what your question was.
It does. I think it does, because if you say, well, I need to find my purpose, that kind of has a tone of
God
accidental.
has a purpose for me.
Yeah, it's something for me. Whereas if you make that purpose, you say, okay, like you said, what is God's purpose? What does God want me to do?
Right.
That's my purpose. Let me go do that. Now that you're not going to get a specific, you can't go to the Bible and say, okay, God wants me to be a window washer.
Right.
That's not there.
Probably not going to find
Rouge.
Right. What's that?
Probably not going to find it.
It's not going to be there. Yeah.
No.
But even like
Maybe a foot washer.
Yeah, I don't get paid for that.
But those specific things are not going to be there, because I don't think God, this is probably going to offend some people, but I don't think he cares. And
You don't think he cares?
You don't think he cares?
No, wow. I mean, in some regards, like, does it
God cares.
Does it matter if you wash windows or you do? I
think you just undone our whole argument.
Well, no,
it has meaning.
It does. Well, it has meaning, but
in the specifics, does it matter if we're doing X, Y, or Z necessarily?
Like you said, your career path, it wasn't one you would have picked, but because you did that, it gave you an opportunity to do something that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Sure. No, right.
So it
doesn't matter that you're a window washer.
Right.
Because it's providing a means to be able to do what you feel like is God's purpose over here.
I could have been a rock star, but no,
you probably not.
And what you did, you made a purpose.
Yes.
Instead of just living haphazardly.
I guess. I see what you're saying, but I would think that I'm more like I wanted to find God's purpose for my life, and that's very broad to begin with. The broad purpose is to worship Him, to love Him, and okay, I'm doing that, and then to love my wife and my family. Okay, I'm doing that to supply, to provide for my family and all that. That is a purpose. The church. What is the purpose of the church? That was a big part of my life. Right. So I want to see what he has for that. What's the purpose of work? Do I just work 50 hours a week and never see my family? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to find a job that's conducive for that. What can I do that I can work the least amount and still make? Oh no, I'm just. What's a job that I can do what I feel like is what God. His purpose on this planet is, which still gives us meaning in what we're doing. So I
agree with you that, you're saying the things I'm not going to disagree with, because you're talking in more generalities.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
But the idea of somebody taking the next 3 years to figure out what purpose God's had for me.
Right.
It's not a good idea.
No, probably not.
Well, because I've dealt with this. I've struggled with this a long time. It's a good question, because it gets into what is God's will for your life.
Right.
And most of the time when people say, well, you got to find your gift, which it's not biblical.
It's the season, Larry. What's your gift?
So you're starting from a false premise. And I think, like you said, God has given us general ideas of what he wants us to do in regards to marriage, family, things like that. He does want us to work. Whatever that is, Paul says, whatever you do all to the glory of God.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're doing a job that's unethical or immoral, then you're not fitting God's purpose.
No, that's for sure.
But if you look around and find areas where you see God working, God's work, and then decide to get involved,
sure,
that may change in 2 or 3 years, but you're not sitting around not being useful to God.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like, real quick, I mean, we've got a couple verses here we want to talk about. Is like, why do the podcast? Why are we doing this? Yeah. Why are we doing this? And if it's to become rich and famous, we have failed. That's a bad reason.
Wow.
But if,
not yet.
But if our reason, our purpose is to do God's work and to try to glorify Him, try to proclaim truth and to encourage families in many different ways, then the results don't matter as much. To me, they matter a little bit, but they don't matter as much. Or if something's going wrong, it's not the purpose is wrong. Maybe we're doing something wrong, and we have to reevaluate. Yeah. Okay, do we need to do something different? Do we need to do something else? But I still think that we're not doing it to build my own kingdom here. I want to do it to build God's kingdom and His purposes. Okay, so let's get to James 4:14. This is not the most encouraging Bible verse, but
Okay, it says, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away.
So it's a vapor, right? That's like what you're talking about. It's we get so caught up sometimes about this is it. This isn't it. It's a vapor. Yeah. It is fleeting, and the next thing
it's
you know,
dash, right?
It is.
It's a dash.
And if you think of, I think it was, I don't remember who said this, but think of life as a play. Our role into that play is a very small part. And
I think Hitler said that.
No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I think it was Rush Limbaugh. But we don't have an effect on what happened before that. And our part in the play may have an effect on what comes after, but it's a small part in that play.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so what about, this is your one of your favorite verses here, right?
Yeah.
John 17:4. We just covered this in Bible study.
It says, I have glorified thee on the earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do, which of course is Jesus saying that. And so I don't know. I found
this is right before he got crucified, right?
Right. And I just found it interesting because he says he finishes the work that God gave him to do. And there were many people that weren't healed. There were many people he didn't talk to, and yet he was at peace knowing I finished the work you gave me to do.
That's
and I
true.
thought, wow.
And it's interesting. You look at it, he says, when he says that, it's coupled with, I've glorified thee on the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what we're to do, right?
Right.
And we're to work until it's time to go home.
Right.
And you know how you still have work to do?
Because you're still here.
That's right. You're still here, man.
And that's another interesting point, because our purpose, as we live our life, our purposes change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, y'all know, like you said, you're fixing to enter into a newer season. Children are getting grown up. You're about to have your first grandchild.
Yes.
Yeah.
That season is changing.
Yep.
And so the purposes sometimes will change with that as well. I know I'm thinking of Michael. Michael's at a point right now where it's a lot of younger children.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and he feels like, life is wake up, do the work, drink the coffee, check the emails, wash, rinse, repeat. And I feel for him. He's looking like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. And I understand. I've been there at a time of my life. I'm not there today. The purpose is shifted, where it feels like, there's other things that God's got us doing right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's an important key, because like I was telling my kids, 99% of life is lived in the mundane and the boring, the simple things.
Yeah.
You don't want your life to be always exciting.
We talked about that the other day. It's like, that is exhausting. We can't live in that.
Yeah, because it's either really good or really bad.
But you think of, like, most Christians, they want to be that hero.
Yep.
But look at the Apostle Paul. I mean, he was a hero of the faith, but look at his life and what he went through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you willing to drink that cup?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want that.
So we're going to end the show here on that. After that verse, like, what is our work and are we doing it? And that is a personal challenge, going back to making it personal. What phase of life you're in, whether you're 80 or 18, you're in a different phase than everybody. Right. But God has given us a work to do. You're still alive here. You're still on the earth. Are you glorifying God? And are you finishing His work that He has for us? There's some people out there that aren't doing His work. they're just doing their work. They want to do what they want to do. And so it is a challenge to me and to all of us, I think, that we need to do his work and that we can say, right before we die, that, Lord, I have glorified you on the earth and I have finished my work. Or like Paul said, I've finished.
Fought the good fight. I finished the race. Kept the faith.
I finished can we say that? Are we running a race? So find that out. Whether you just got married and there's a reason there, or whether you are a grandparent, or whether you're just whatever transition you're in, or not transition, whatever
phase.
Yeah, phase
season
you're in.
of life.
Season. Thank you. Whatever season or whatever you are, whatever ministry you find yourself doing, do it mightily unto the Lord. And so anyway, that's our encouragement. If you have questions or whatever, just email us at whatever it is, talk at fellowshipofbelievers.org and let us know what your purpose is.
The Mike Charleston Show.
History with Larry.
All right, Larry.
All right.
Another history time. You said this was kind of easy one, though.
It's an easy one. But it's kind of, we'll reminisce, especially since this is the holiday season. Packages are coming and stuff.
Packages are coming, yes.
I think that's a clue.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you remember, like, ordering things now? You can order things off Amazon, eBay.
But I remember the Sears catalog and the JCPenney's catalog. Yes.
And you had to...
Do you know Amazon has a catalog?
Really? I didn't know that.
Full of toys and stuff.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I circled things this week.
Oh, did you? Awesome. No. Yeah. But you had to look at the catalog, and then you had to write the number down. You had to fill out the form. You had to send it in.
We didn't do that.
Oh, really?
My parents just went to Sears then.
Oh, well.
Right.
But if you want to order from the catalog...
Maybe they did, because I was a Steelers fan, and I doubt my local Sears had Steelers gear.
You like people who stole things?
Yeah,
But it took a while. Like, you order it.
Yes, it did.
And it would be 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes even 8 weeks before you got it.
Larry?
They came from China.
What are you doing?
Yes.
Yeah. And, like, writing a letter or talk, like, if you had friends or family that lived out of state.
I feel like you're explaining the Postal Service.
We're getting there. It's all part of it. Right. Because we live in an age
Maybe these
where...
kids don't know how it works, but it did take a little bit.
Right.
They call it snail mail for a reason.
Well, not only that, like, if you had family or friends in another state and you wanted to call them, you could call them, but you had to limit your time.
Well, somewhat. I mean, you had to pay long distance.
Right, because you had long distance charges and stuff.
Yes.
So we don't live in that era anymore, and the kids now, they don't know anything about that.
Aren't you glad we're not living in that era? That's such a weird era.
I mean, we have
Had to
instant
get calling cards and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. There are whole businesses over that, calling cards and stuff. MCI calling cards.
Oh, my goodness.
But I mean, today, communication's instant. Like, you can...
Somewhat.
Even at some cities, you order something on Amazon, and it's
the same day.
Same day, yeah.
Same day.
Like, that's incredible. It's amazing. But it wasn't always like that.
No.
Not at all.
No. The Pony Express.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, is that where we're going?
That is it.
How about that? The Pony Express.
Yeah, because you think about, like, to send a letter from
Boston,
or New Jersey to California.
A long time.
Months. And for a while there, because they didn't have the railroad, or even just crossing by horseback took forever.
They took air balloons, right?
That's right. And it was very expensive. I mean, it literally could take months because it had to be, you weren't driving there. So just a quick story, but we know the company as the Pony Express, but that wasn't the official name of the company.
Oh, really?
From what I could tell, it was two companies kind of combined, and they named it the
Federal Express?
No. Interesting thing. Well, that's a different subject, but Federal Express is a good study if you want to study business. But anyway, the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company.
Good night.
Yeah.
What's the anagram there? Or
I know they weren't. I guess they didn't know about, because they didn't have they didn't have a telephone book to make it short names and keep it at the front and all that. But anyway, they're the ones who actually started the Pony Express.
Sure.
And they guaranteed delivery from Missouri to California in 10 days.
Okay.
Which was quite impressive at the time.
Without trains?
No trains, all
man.
horseback riding.
That's where they got the motto, like rain, sleet, and snow.
Yeah, I think it was because they had to go, and recruiting horse riders was difficult because you had to find somebody that was not very tall, kind of small because of weight for the horses.
Oh, okay.
They wanted to keep the weight down.
He's tall and skinny.
That may have worked, but they had to be outdoorsmen. They had to know the terrain. They had to know how to ride horses.
Wasn't everybody back then outdoorsmen?
Well, not necessarily, but I mean, you're talking the frontier. There was no McDonald's to stop at. There's no exits on the interstate.
Exactly. They're all outdoorsmen.
Yeah. You had to, and most of the time the runs for the riders was 75 to 100 miles, but they would switch horses every 10 to 15 miles.
Sweet. Okay. So like the Iditarod or something. You know.
Depending on the terrain. If it was flat terrain, it would be every 15 miles. And the horse was on a gallop the whole time.
Wow.
To keep up the pace. So they actually used a mixed breed horse. It was a wild Mustang horse with a domestic horse.
I think if I was the Postal Service, later on, be like, hey, just to keep it real, we should get Mustangs.
That's right. Yeah, they should have. I know, it would have been great. But so they had to recruit these guys, and you're out long times. I mean, you think of a 10-mile ride in a car on the interstate, you're talking maybe
10 minutes.
10 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's nothing.
10 miles on a horse.
Different story.
That's a long way.
Yeah, that's a sore bottom too.
And so you do your 10 miles, switch, get a new horse.
I thought you went 70 miles.
Well, so for the horse would switch, but the rider would keep going. He would switch horses, keep going until 75 to 100 miles.
They have stations all along this?
Yeah, they had stations, so they'd stop. When their run, they completed their 75, 100 miles, they'd stop at a station where they could eat a nice meal consisting of bread, dried fruit, cured meat, some coffee.
Nice meal.
But the biggest thing was they had a bed to sleep in.
Oh, the horse or the guy?
Both. Yeah, the horses were well taken care of. But the other thing, so how long do you think the Pony Express lasted?
Well, when did it start?
I don't remember. Oh, okay. I forgot. It was in the 1860s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess it lasted 50 years.
What do you think?
Maybe 60 years. 60 years, because 60 to 1920.
I'm thinking it's longer than that.
Railroad came into existence. I'm going to stick with 50.
Okay. You are like way off. Way off.
100 years?
18 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, here, now it's going to go bigger.
Well, they were like, this is not a good idea.
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, technology, because the transcontinental
the SOS
telegraph.
Yeah, that came into being.
It was completed, and
they could text each other now.
The expense. It was like $5 an ounce originally to send a letter on the Pony Express, which at that time would be kind of equivalent, or actually would cost more for us to do like an overnight express package today.
Easily, yeah.
It was like
crazy.
Towards the end, they lowered the price to $1 an ounce, but it still was too expensive. People weren't using it. And so that's what kind of brought about their demise. But I thought I was with you. I thought it was a lot longer but just 18 months.
18 months.
And the company lost money.
Oh, they went bankrupt.
Yeah. So it just was a very short. But one note before we finish of a guy he holds the record.
Okay.
As the longest and the fastest ride. His nickname was Pony Bob. Pony Bob Haslam.
Did he have anyway, whatever.
He rode, originally he ended up riding 190 miles.
Okay.
On a single day.
Okay.
Now this is on horseback.
Right.
190 miles on a single day. He was supposed to get a rest. Couldn't. Because when he got to the station, there was no rider to
So he just kept going.
So he had to turn around and do the route back.
Oh, wow.
But on the way back, he ended up stopping to switch horses like they did. And he was able to rescue one of the station masters from an Indian attack.
Wow.
And he kept on riding. Okay. So he completed about 360 miles in 40 hours on horseback.
That's pretty impressive.
That's...
Wow.
Yeah.
Pony Bob.
Yeah, ouch.
Pony Bob saved the day.
Yeah, but that's the Pony Express. You think about, I mean, we take it for granted getting a package today.
Yes.
But for those back then, and it really wasn't that long ago.
Actually, I get kind of perturbed if it's like 5 days. Like, what is
what
up?
happened? Yeah.
Come on, Amazon.
Where's my ebook?
That's right. Yes. True story. I bought an ebook and it took me like a week to get it. And I'm like, it should be here right now. But anyways.
Yeah, that's a quick story of the Pony Express. But
we are
pretty
spoiled.
Cool. Yeah, we're spoiled.
We
today.
are very spoiled.
Yeah,
but that's a cool story. I was way off.
Yeah, I asked Pam the same thing, and she said the same. She was about the same
Samsonite.
as you.
So off.
I was thinking at least 10, 15 years.
Right, something.
18 months. Was it.
That's a failure because that's pretty popular in popular culture, pop culture. Pony
Right.
Express and things like that. And when you watch these old time movies, the guys are. Whatever.
Yeah.
I guess they did all these movies in an 18-month window.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Maybe they came up with something different.
But talk about tough guys. I mean, you're out in the weather by yourself, harsh terrain.
Oh, yeah.
And even harsher Indians, things like that.
Harsher Indians.
Yeah. Well, they were subject to... Well, that's one of the reasons why they picked those horses.
I think we call them natives now.
Natives, yeah. Was because those horses could outrun the Apache horses.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, the Apache horse, they were known for horse riding and stuff.
Yeah, but because of the wild strand in the Pony Express horses, they were faster and could run longer distance.
How about that?
Yeah. So tough guys.
Yeah, tough guys. Cool.
But anyway, that's the Pony Express.
Sounds cool.
The Mike Charleston Show. Music with Sarah.
What song do you like?
All right, babe. The song of the week. In fact, this one's a special song of the week, right?
It is special because I said that not only is this my song of the week, but I believe that this is...
It might be your favorite worship song of all time.
Of all time.
Of all time.
And which is really...
That's saying something.
That's saying a lot.
That's saying a lot.
But I feel like this song has withstood the test of time.
Okay, because it is old.
It was written in 1975.
Before I was born.
Right, before I was born too. And so, and it's still, even in the last, I would say 6 months, it's come out on recent albums.
Like an add-on?
As an
like
add-on
a bridge
usually.
or something, right?
And so it's like, it still is out there. It still is amazing. And so I'm not the only one that likes it, but other people still like it. And so I just feel like this has to be my favorite of all time.
Okay, so what is this song?
So
this song is...
Without further ado...
Oh, this is... Drum roll, please.
This song is I Exalt Thee.
I Exalt Thee, made famous by Phil Driscoll, but was written by Pete Sanchez in 1975.
Right. And he wrote it, and then Phil Driscoll was the one in 1983 on his album, I Exalt Thee.
Right. If you remember the trumpeter, Phil Driscoll.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I will say, I mean, I've listened to many versions, and actually I looked on Spotify, and there's probably between 50 and 70-ish versions of I Exalt Thee. So there are a lot, not just on Spotify. I'm sure there are more that aren't on Spotify.
Sure.
But I will say the Phil Driscoll version, I think
Still your best?
It's just amazing.
Still your favorite?
It's just beautiful.
It's
And
classic.
I get it. He doesn't have the best voice, but
No, it's rough. It's gravelly.
I think it's a great version. But anyway,
Okay, he doesn't sound that bad.
But anyway, so I read the story about the author, Pete Sanchez, and how he came about to write it. And
because it's really not like a deep song here. It is not. It's very simple, but there is a little bit of a story.
Yep. So he was 26 when he wrote it.
26.
And he had been in ministry, but he had recently gotten married. And so he decided to take a step back from active ministry because he had come from a divorced family, felt like he had some baggage that went with that for some reason.
Sure.
And so he's like, I'm just going to step back.
He's got to find his purpose.
And that's right. And I'm going to take some time and read through the Psalms. And he decided,
not a bad idea.
He decided, how about as I read through the Psalms, I'll write a song for each Psalm.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a big goal.
So I didn't look up to see what other songs he wrote. I have no idea.
I did. Remember? I went through all these songs.
Okay, well, that's true.
Whatever.
Well, so he came to Psalm 97.
Psalm 97.
Verse 9.
So he wrote 96 songs before that?
I would guess so. I don't know if he went in order.
No.
But so he got to Psalm 97:9, and it said, For thou, O Lord, art high above all the earth. Thou art exalted far above all gods. and he went to the piano and came up with a little melody that went with that, and he liked it, but he felt like something was missing.
Yeah, something was missing, because if you just sang that part,
something's missing.
Not the greatest worship song ever.
And so,
in your opinion,
for 18, exactly. Well, so for 18 months, it sat there, and he'd go back to it and go back to it and go back to it. And he just felt like that just something's missing. And after 18 months, one day he went to the piano and started playing and got to finish that part. And then just the I Exalt Thee came out, and it was like, this is it. This is amazing.
Well, I mean,
and
you would think like it was so simple. Why couldn't you just said I Exalt Thee? But it fit. It is a kind of one of the ultimate like worship songs. Like when you are exalting God, you are worshiping Him. You're praising Him. You're worshiping Him.
Yeah.
So any kind of song that has exalt in Him, we exalt, we extol, we worship. You know, we are magnifying Him. You know, that is a worship type thing. So it's like I said, this is a very simple song. You can sing it over and over again, but it's not one of those. It reminds me of like the angels in heaven when they're around the throne singing "Holy, Holy, Holy, Lord God Almighty," and people are like against repeating songs, and I get it, but the angels repeat that phrase over and over and over. Why? Because He is holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. And I exalt Thee. It's like when you just don't even know what else to say. Like I don't know what else to give to God.
Right.
But I exalt Him.
Right.
You know, and I exalt Thee. And so it's kind of at the heart of who we are. I can't offer Him any more than just praise.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I love the simplicity of it. And like you say, it's easy to catch on. So like some songs people in worship maybe won't sing because they don't know all the words. They don't know how it goes. I'm like,
if you don't know the words by the end, that's on you.
I mean, after one time, I'm like, some people will just sing. A lot of people have just sung the chorus and they never knew there was a verse to it. They just know that I exalt Thee. And then some people will say, instead of I exalt Thee, they'll say, for you are holy, for you are worthy. And then you can just sing that a bunch of times. And and I heard one version, I think it's by Celtic worship, and they do, I exalt Thee, you're holy, you're worthy. And then they go into, you're worthy of it all. That's pretty cool. So
on Celtic worship, I did not hear that one. So yeah.
So anyway, but it's a great song. Obviously, it's a classic. And I think for me, I would say it's the best worship song of all time. So the version you want people to go listen to is the Phil Driscoll version. The original 1983 Phil Driscoll. Yeah.
Okay.
Go check it out.
We probably have that over here somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's probably playing. You're probably at the trumpet scene right now.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's really good, but I feel like it's withstood the test of time. It's not just cool for now. It's not just like it's just for decades and decades and decades people have been singing it. So.
Decades and hopefully decades more.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thanks a lot.
The Mike Charleston Show. Marriage.
All right, babe. After this week's topic, we're what would we talk about in marriage? We're actually like we don't really know the purpose of this segment, but in marriage, we didn't really talk specifically in the other segment, the main segment, about marriage and the purpose of marriage. And like there's a meaning. Why do people get married? Why? Because God said so. The animals don't get married. But there's something in us that we want to commit and we want to share our lives and raise children and pass that on to other people. And it's not until the atheist and humanist have come in to where we don't really need a normal nuclear family. Where we could have kids spread throughout and it's not a big deal, but it is important.
It is. And I think oftentimes as just people, we struggle with the purpose for a lot of things like we just talked about, but God had a purpose when He created marriage.
Well, He did. And I think creating us humans, like one of His big purposes was to create us in the image of His Son. Now, obviously, the Old Testament, they didn't quite have Jesus, but when New Testament comes on and Jesus comes on the scene. And so one of the big purposes, if you want to keep using that word, is that we are to be conformed to the image of His Son. And let's talk about it like this. So in a marriage specifically, and people in general, people are going to rub each other in good ways and bad ways. So they either sharpen you or dull you, and that grows us. Like I was talking to a guy at work, and he just recently had his second child, and it's wearing him out, and he's not enjoying it right now.
Aww.
And it's just his marriage is suffering somewhat from it. I'm sure they're sleeping in separate rooms because the babies just don't sleep at night, and they're very frustrated. And he's like, "There's nothing fun about this." And I'm just kind of smiling because look, we've been through this too, a long time ago. And I'm like, you know what though? It's good for you. This is good for you. And he didn't quite understand what I was getting at, but I'm like, it's good for you because it's doing something in you. It's testing you and it's growing you. And so it's taking the selfishness that is in you and purging you, you know. And so the purpose of marriage is not only there's the purpose of marriage is multifaceted. There's many purposes for marriage, but one of the purposes, I believe, is to take two individuals who can be selfish, can be self-centered, and to bring them together and to force them to learn to sacrifice for one another. Yeah. And you think you got it, then God adds kids into it. So to humble yourself and to consider someone else. So when I was single, I didn't have to consider really anybody. Like I had roommates that I stayed with, and I had to consider them somewhat, or some of my friends. But when I got married, now I had to consider you at all times. Like I can't just go hang out with my friends. Like I had to check in, like, hey, what are you doing? What do you want to do? Is it all right if I... same thing with you. Like you couldn't just all of a sudden get up and go to your parents' house and go spend some time with your mom. I mean, you could,
right?
But that's not going to help.
It's not going to be good for our marriage if I'm just living my life and doing what I want for myself.
Right. So I think a marriage, one of the purposes of marriage, and we've talked about this before, is to help purify us. Because when it says love God and love your neighbors, the closest neighbor we have is our spouse.
Yeah.
And that's the big testing ground. If we can do that there, then we can do that outside the home.
Yeah.
And that's where it really proves ourselves because we know each other so well, the good and the bad, And so people know like, oh, that one little thing, like, why did that trigger you to just go off, And well, because there's history, there's all this other stuff. And you can even see this somewhat in workplaces. People you've been working with for a long time are really, really good friends. Just every once in a while, that person will just get on your nerves for whatever reason. And it teaches us that we have to deny ourselves. We have to deny our selfishness, the selfishness that we may have or things that I want to do, and consider those people around us.
Yeah.
And marriage is perfect for that. It's not the only reason, obviously, but it's not just to fulfill my needs and so I can get whatever I want out of it. That is just pure selfishness, and you're just going to add that onto the selfish layer.
Right.
And so many people think they're going to get satisfied in marriage and get what they want, and it just adds to the problems. But once you realize that really marriage is to bring two people together and make them one and one unit, just like as God is with, Father and Son as one, that takes some work. And it does something in me, it does something in you, and it's as we're doing that, it's helping us grow closer to God and be conformed to the image of His Son, because He is the ultimate selfless person. Right. I mean, he's the example, the ultimate. He gave His life, and in fact, in Ephesians, it tells husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave Himself for it. So, like, I'm supposed to give my life for your sake. And that doesn't mean to give you everything you want, but I'm giving myself everything that I have for you and for my family and so on. So,
right. Well, and I think He ultimately wants to refine us so that we will be the picture, like it says in Ephesians there, that picture of Christ in the church. Yep. Marriage is supposed to be that picture. So we're supposed to be the picture to the world of what that's supposed to look like if we can
absolutely.
get there.
So. Yeah, so if you think you're going to get happy, I hope you are happy in your marriage, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But if you think that's the purpose of marriage is to make you more fulfilled, you're going into it with the selfish attitude, and you're going to have a rude awakening, and God's going to purify you. And it's not just through marriage. You're going to have friends and family and work and everything else is helping purify us to conform to the image of His Son. So I think that is a very important part of the purpose of marriage. Yeah. But it's also to do all things, become one and get to know someone. And, that's the one big thing is like, I wanted someone to know me. And, we've spent the last 25 years getting to know each other in many ways, and it's been fun. So that's an exciting part of it. And that process becoming one is very challenging, but can be very exciting. So anyway, any last words on that one?
And very rewarding.
And very rewarding. Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Absolutely. And then you have kids that can take care of you when you're older. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed, and I guess just chill to the next episode.
Hey, this is Joshua Charleston, the producer of The Mike Charleston Show. Thank you for listening to the show. If you want to follow us, we're on Facebook at Mike Charleston Show and Instagram at _Mike Charleston Show. Please support us on Patreon for exclusive content. This episode is over, but if you want more, check out the website at fellowshipofbelievers.org for more information. The Mike Charleston Show has been brought to you by Fellowship of Believers.